Wow. Our profession is words, but I'm going to disappoint all you today because words cannot express just how truly humbled I feel about this great honor you bestowed on us today. Um, Folks, we have got the greatest job in the world, and I know a lot of you in here know it. I know of no other profession where the public hands you a ticket to this great theater called life, and all the great tragedies and victories of our times played out on the stage before us, and all the public asks in return is for an honest review of what you've seen, and maybe on a good day, some insight into what it all means. And so every day we embark on this great Don Quixote-like adventure called journalism, not knowing from one day to the next where that adventure will take us or where it will all end. All we know is we'll get the opportunity to tilt at a few windmills along the way. When I look at the list of journalists who have been inducted into this hall before me, I stand in awe. Just look at a few of the names in the very first class of honorees. It includes such names as Will Rogers, Edward K. Gaylord, and Roscoe Dungy. Mr. Gaylord and his family spent more than a century building not only a venerable newspaper, but a great city and state. Roscoe Dungy, the son of a slave, founded the Black Dispatch newspaper and spoke out for racial justice and civil rights, not only before that was fashionable, but when it was dangerous as well. And Will Rogers, I wore my Will Rogers pin today. Will Rogers for president. We need that right now. He was the person I consider to be the greatest journalist of all time. He could say in a few words what most people can't say in weeks. I like to think of Will Rogers as the father of modern journalism. Sometimes when editors say, tell me I need to blog and tweet and shoot video and write stories all at the same time, I'm almost ready to say, are you nuts? But then I think of Will Rogers, who made movies, wrote columns, did a vaudeville act, and twirled a rope all at the same time, and I realize journalism hasn't really changed all that much in Oklahoma. I know why these people were inducted into Oklahoma's Journalism Hall of Fame. They were people of great talent, courage, and vision. And I don't even have to go to the Oklahoma history books to know why some of the others were elected to this hall. I've had the great honor and privilege to work with you. And I know your courage and vision. I was there in the newsroom after the Albert P. Murrah building blew up. I saw our then editor, Ed Kelly, look Robbie Trammell, Nolan Clay, and myself directly in the eyes and say, your job is to find out who did this. I don't care if it takes 10 years and the FBI gives up and goes home. Your job is to make sure whoever did this is brought to justice. And then he turned to some of the other journalists that we had, the ones that were the better writers in the office, and he said, your job is to tell the stories of the people who died here today. People need to know why their lives were important. In the midst of chaos, in an unfathomable moment of clarity, he set the standard by which all subsequent disaster coverage has been judged. We all got tested in the months and years that followed. For days, everyone was looking for a mysterious bomber known only as John Doe No. 2. We got all kinds of tips into the office from people who were certain they knew exactly who it was. I remember one tip seemed especially promising. So Robbie and I drove out to a little house in the northwest part of the city. We sat in the car and watched the house for a few minutes, openly speculating what was likely to happen. When we walked up and rang the doorbell, what were the chances that he would come out firing? That's when Robbie looked over at me and said, it won't do us any good if we both get killed. I'll go up there and ring the doorbell. Somebody needs to write the story. Of course, it wasn't too many years after that Robbie decided to become an editor. So now he pushes Nolan and I out the door in these situations. But that's another story for another day. Courage, sacrifice. I can't begin to express to you how thrilled I am to be inducted into this hall on the same day as my good friend Nolan Clay. Identifying the primary Oklahoma City bomber happened much quicker than any of us expected. But tracking down all the other leads and making sure Tim McVeigh was brought to ultimate justice was indeed a long, hard slog that took years to complete. While the rest of us stayed at home with our families, Nolan traveled to all of the trials of McVeigh and Nichols, hearing over and over again the heart-wrenching stories of parents who lost their children in the bombing. Those are the types of stories that tear at our very souls. Nolan took one for the team. I was also there the day that Nolan went out to cover a tornado and found rubble at the place he had called home. What did Nolan do? He wrote the story. The personal story is the hardest. That's why I have so much admiration for Kelly Dyer Fry. Kelly knows all too well the tragedy that drug addiction has inflicted on Oklahoma families and how hard those families often strive to keep their suffering secret. So Kelly set out on a crusade to do something about the state's drug addiction problem, and she started by telling her own family's story very publicly. And then there's Mike Shannon, the oracle of the newsroom. Mike has saved many jobs over the years by offering sage advice on when it's time to fire the shot that will be heard around the world, and when it's better just to keep your powder dry. I could go on and on with stories about men and women who are members of the Hall. But there's one mystery I can't solve for you today. What the heck am I doing here? All I've done is tilted a few windmills, and thank God and the people of Oklahoma for giving me that opportunity. Hopefully it means that occasionally I landed a jab in the right place. There's one other person I did to thank here today, and I saved this for last, not because she's the least important, but because I was afraid I might get a little emotional. I want to thank my wonderful wife, Shirley. While I've been out chasing tornadoes and bombers and crooked politicians, all too often she's been left at home, watching the food get cold and wondering when I'll get home. I like to say that we raised two wonderful children, but really, it was mostly her. You can tell because they both became National Merit Scholars. You can tell I didn't meddle in that too much. Shirley, I love you. And thank you, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Randy. I think what Randy just did was